I mean, even though I'm half American, half Italian, I will say the Italian part of my heritage has taken over a lot of my identity.
That was Marcia Gagliardi of Tablehopper and My Milligram. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. Before we dig into this episode, I want to pause a moment in honor of Taylor Nichols, a guest of our show who passed away last week. Please take a moment to go back and listen to Taylor's episodes with us. You'll hear a fifth-generation San Franciscan confess her love of North Beach, share her story of getting started as a tattooer, and talk about her ray of hope for this city. Thanks. In this podcast, Marcia starts off with her impressive ancestry and deep Italian roots. She grew up on the Peninsula and has stories of coming to the city as a teenager to arrange restaurant deals for her high school classmates back home. She ends this podcast with her year in Venice during college. Here's Marcia.
My mom's mom, incredible woman. My grandmother is still alive. She is in San Mateo, and she's a force. She raised 3 girls on her own. She divorced and drove the girls out from Michigan in her convertible Cadillac, because, you know, Detroit.
Yes.
But ended up...
it's like an alternate plot to Thelma and Louise.
Completely, but with the kids.
Badass.
Yeah, badass,
Yeah.
totally. And originally landed in South Lake Tahoe, and she was working in one of the casinos as a cocktail waitress. And then eventually just kept making their way. Well, she also, there was some family in Sacramento, so that was part of the pool of coming to back to California. And so, and then my dad, so I'm first generation on my dad's side. He is from Calabria, which is in southern Italy, in the toe of the boot. Exactly, bravo, the pepperoncini.
Yes.
So he came to the States when he was 14. So it was post World War II.
Okay.
Southern Italy was just destroyed,
right.
and there was nothing. And
where did he go?
Well, they ended up. Well, so there was his uncle and aunt who came out first, and it was pretty incredible because my grandmother actually had American citizenship, but grew up in southern Italy. So we have relatives in Colorado, but then they ended up going back to Italy, and so she grew up there, but then came to California, and then they were here. My grandparents, it was they went back to Italy 2 or 3 months before I was born.
Okay.
My grandfather, he'd had it. He was just missed Italy. And that's the thing, when you are born in Italy, it's just this deeply embedded part of your entire existence.
Sure.
That, and I see my dad pine for Italy in the same way. He always has to go back and check in, and it's his touchstone. And so if too much time goes by where he hasn't been to see the family, he gets antsy. But
So your grandparents went back, but your dad
my dad
stayed.
Stayed with his because at that point he was married, and his brother.
To your mom.
Yep.
Okay.
And my brother, my uncle Frank, my dad's brother, he was also married, and my cousin David was just born. We were three months apart. So I always felt really bad for my grandmother, particularly because here are, her sons, their sons having kids, and just because of my grandfather's desire to go back to Italy, we talk about it as a family, what if Rose had stood up to him and just was
What did you call her, Nonna?
She was let's see, she was always grandma, just because she spoke she spoke English.
Oh, okay.
When I'm in Italy, I would call her Nonna, but so she oh my God, such a force. She's my fellow Scorpio grandma, so we
look out.
Yeah, she's so funny. She had a couple sayings where she Scorpios, we die standing.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like anyone who, again, you know, in southern Italy during the war, to be raising these boys, and there's like, she was on a farm, and you know, it was incredible. Like they pressed their own olive oil,
Right.
and there was the small village, you know, wooden and stone oven that they would bake bread. I'll take turns baking bread out of for the week.
And they weren't doing it to get in Food and Wine magazine. That's just what people did, right?
Pretty much.
It's just what you do.
Yeah, you had to work so hard to just eat.
And by now, we look back and we're like, that's fucking amazing. And it is, by all means. I don't want to take anything away, but it's like they weren't doing it, like, to do... it's just a life.
It was, yeah. I mean, think about what you would have to go through to just be able to make bread. And growing wheat and grinding it, and you know, like it just, and then even making a fire for the oven and
harvesting olives. I've seen what is it, Simi Nosrat's documentary.
Oh yes,
where they harvest the olives with the nets out in the. Oh my god! And I was like, and then all those olives make like this much olive oil.
Pretty much, yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah, my dad remembers walking the cow around in a circle because they had a huge, you know, stone, or it was probably granite. I doubt it was marble. But this huge stone to press the olives, the frontoio. Yeah.
Amazing.
And it's, I mean, even though I'm half American, half Italian, I will say the Italian part of my heritage has taken over a lot of my identity.
She's actually very wildly hand gesturing while saying this. I'm just for the record.
I've been known to knock over a few glasses. But it's interesting when you have a place that you can go to that you're like, wow, like my family comes from here. And to be able to go to the farm where my dad was born and grew up, and to see the oven that they cooked out of, and like him telling all the stories of, you know, where he would play and the garden, and taking me into the cellar of the old house, and like, and just seeing the herbs. And so there's that, which is really powerful and deeply emotional and such a gift. I mean, but then also that year that I lived in Italy in school, and I remember going to southern Italy for Christmas to be with the relatives, and it was incredible to sit at this table with, oh my god, my uncle Colino and his wife Olympia. These people cook, and they had a whole like downstairs kitchen with a whole second oven, and I mean they were just insane, and let alone their cantina with all their house-made wine and all the meats and everything. So Christmas Eve dinner, which is the Feast of the Seven Fishes, they call it the Vigilia, the Vigil. It's a huge fandango. But what was amazing was in the middle of like these 35 relatives was this experience of seeing these dishes that we've been making at our family's annual feast for years.
Back home.
Yes.
Right.
And I said to them, I was like, just so you know, we've kept these traditions alive. Like, these are the same clams that we make. This is the same anchovy breadcrumb pasta that we make. You know, oh my god, yeah, that pasta. I know, I have this effect on people.
We gotta pause. And
yeah, I know.
Have a 4-course dinner.
Yeah. So I'm like, let's have the antipasto course during our interview here. I know that would be the Italian way. I'm like, are you hungry? So yeah, I remember that was a real poignant moment of coming full circle in my life and growing up.
Maybe making you appreciate your dad keeping those traditions,
Completely.
right? Yeah.
Completely. And why you don't mess with them. Like,
right.
It's like, no, there's a through line here. And it's like, you know, you can riff a little bit on some recipes, but some things you need to keep the integrity of them, which Italians are very good at. It's like, don't mess with a matriciana, cacio e pepe, carbonara. Like, they're like, if I see you coming at it with some pancetta or cream, like, it's not a carbonara anymore. So you can make your own version of it, but don't call it a carbonara.
Right.
So I think, you know, Italians, from a traditional standpoint, it's such a big part of their cuisine.
We'll get back to this later, but I'm just hearing just how imbued Italian heritage is in your life.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that might have had something to do with something we'll talk about later.
Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting when we were living in Mariposa. My family opened a pizzeria and a delicatessen up there. And so it was a Gagliardi pizzeria and delicatessen.
The only one in town, maybe? Or
Definitely
Yeah.
of that. I mean, there were a couple pizzerias, but, you know, nothing, certainly on a deli standpoint. Like, my dad had all these imported meats and Italian wines, and he was making house-made sausage. And but sadly, Mariposa, like, they just really wanted roast beef for the most part, but
under a heat lamp,
yeah,
roast beef.
God,
Which,
yeah, you know,
yeah.
actually not bad,
Just different.
Yeah. So yeah, he you know, has just been, and he's just always making things at home with. He does his own salumi.
Still?
Yep. Oh yeah, he just was showing off his latest upgrade to the meat locker in the garage. Like,
Good.
yeah, he makes incredible sausage. Oh my God, like when it's Christmas, we're always like, yes. And then, yeah, he's done his own wine, his own olives, he built his pizza oven in the back. Like,
He's my hero.
it's a, Carmen has a whole thing going on.
Well, can we talk real quickly? What was it about Mariposa / getting out of San Mateo? Do you know for your parents?
Well, specifically, I mean, you know, it certainly ties in for my dad with wanting to get back to the country.
Right.
And it all really was precipitated by this. He built this wood fence on our house. We were living in Foster City at the time.
Okay.
And he built this big wood fence, and the neighbors came after him that it was like too tall and not fitting with the neighborhood. You know, there wasn't really an association, but they were basically coming for him. And they forced him to cut down half the fence in the front. And I know that just, that stuck in his craw. And yeah, I know that was like a turning point where he was just like, I can't with this.
Straw that broke the camel's back.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And then I think wanting, as kids to like let us get closer to nature. And so, and my mom, I mean, it's amazing. She was a nurse and was able to find work up there. And so here's my dad, you know, opening the deli. Oh, and they bought like 69 acres of land. So the idea was that his buddy, who was Mike Daniele, who was an architect, was going to build us this house. And it was going to be solar, which was amazing.
Okay. Like in the 70s?
This was, let's see, I was in third grade. And so at that point I would have been, so this was like 1980.
Okay.
And so Mike was going to build us this house. My dad got this huge Caterpillar, and like we'd be out on the property on the weekends. But then sadly, you know, with the deli, it just wasn't making enough money. And as a business, it wasn't working. And eventually my parents had to give up the dream, and then we moved back to San Mateo.
Okay.
So I moved back here. Yeah, I started 6th grade.
And then all through 6th through high school?
Yep.
Back in San Mateo?
Yep. And it's kind of funny. My mom, she went to Aragon High School. She was the first graduating class. And so then I went, and I had some of the same teachers. Be like, do you?
Wow.
I was like, yeah. I was just asked people if they remembered my mom. A couple of them did.
Right.
My favorite English teacher, who was actually a big reason why I became an English major. He was Mr. Fisher then, but then he became Dr. Fisher.
Yes.
And it's kind of, it was fun to be able to go back, and I even tracked a few down after I graduated from college just to thank them. And then even again, whenever there's some like local press written about me, my name will pop up, and there was someone from Aragon who reached out, and they're like, wow, this is so great seeing what Marcia is doing. And so that's kind of a fun part of being local.
Cool.
Yeah, you still get tracked.
Do you happen to remember, I'm guessing you must have come to the city before your time in UCLA. Do you remember your first San Francisco memories?
Well, we came to the city a lot.
Okay.
Certainly we'd have a family like weekend excursion where we'd come up, and like we'd go to Union Square. And one thing I always remember about those trips is that my dad would always buy us flowers at, you know, those little floral stands. So my mom would get a gardenia, and my sister and I would get, I don't know if we'd get carnations or something, but yeah, he'd always take care of his girls. We'd get flowers. And we have a family friend, Charlene, who loved the city, and she brought me up a few times, and she showed me a different side of the city.
Okay.
So like she brought me to Gump's back when it was just in this extraordinary location, and made sure that I understood the details about the space. And I remember she brought me to this crazy wig shop.
Yes.
So, and then we had a relative on my step grandfather's side. He was Italian. So my grandmother, after living here in San Mateo, she did remarry.
The one who drove out with her 3 daughters.
Exactly,
Okay.
Ernie Lena, and so yeah, his family lived in the city. So sometimes we'd visit them. They had. I think Lee might have had some plastic on the couches. It was like
Yes.
that kind of Italian.
Yes.
And yeah, it was always a magical time. But like, I remember, you're going to laugh. This is so funny. I just uncovered this recently. I've been purging my apartment and finding all these old clippings. And so when I was in high school, I wrote for our paper, terrible name, the Aristocrat.
Oh, okay.
Aragon Aristocrat. And I had this. I had a friend. We're actually still very close. She was my best friend and still is in my life. Catherine. So she was one of the girls who got really lucky and got a car when she was, I guess, 15 and a half.
She was that friend.
Yeah. She had her little Golf, and I was a
Nice.
very good navigator, and I was always like, let's go to the city. Let's go to the city. Let's go to the city. So I would come up with an itinerary, and I would navigate. She would drive. Our parents, we were pretty responsible girls, so they'd let us go up. And eventually, I had this idea that I was like, okay, this is so incredible that we can drive to the city and have these experiences, and I want other, students to know where to go. And so we came up with this idea. And this is so crazy because it's like, was I just destined to write about where to go? I think I was. So our column we launched was called Doggy Bag. Not kidding. And we so we would go through the phone book and look up all these businesses, and then we created business cards. So I found one of the business cards.
Awesome.
And we would approach like cafes and bookstores, and we were trying to get discounts for Aragon students if they would show an ID, their student ID. Could they get a discount
Brilliant.
at your cafe? And it was just ridiculous. But I was so obsessed with directions. Like half of the columns were like giving people directions because it was pre-Google.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you're gonna take a right here, and Anyway, I just laugh when I look. I'm like, okay, somebody was navigating, but yeah. So we would try to find where to go for pizza in the marina. And to be totally honest, I was so boy crazy. So when it was Fleet Week, I was always like, can we go to North Beach?
Yeah.
I want to go gawk at sailors.
And how many of those stories can you share?
I know. Parents don't even know about those. Because like in North Beach, you could go to the Savoy Tivoli, and they would serve you.
Oh, underage?
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
It was great. I mean, you'd have to be cool, act like you know what you're doing.
Right.
But and then my first beer in the city was at Zeitgeist.
Yes.
I managed to have a drink there.
Can you get roughly year?
I was like, let me think. Maybe I was like 18, 19. So, I mean, that would have been...
Later 80s?
Yeah.
Pre-earthquake.
Yeah. It would have been like around 88 or something like that.
Okay.
And then... Oh, another one, the Lions Pub, which is DeViz and I guess that's Sacramento. It was a gay bar. And I remember drinking there. I was probably like 20 at that point. I had a couple girlfriends. We could like dress up in our vintage clothes and look kind of like, we were like, it was a little mod, so we could get away with looking a little older, not quite like teeny bopper.
Nice.
But yeah, so I was trying to come to the city as much as possible. I loved it. And, romanticized it.
From a very early age, like coming up with family and
Totally.
then eventually coming up with friends.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was always
And
close.
I mean, but also like writing about it.
It was so random. I need to republish some of these doggy bag
Yeah,
poems.
you do.
I think my readers will crack up.
Totally.
Yeah, it's funny.
I love it, and I'm seeing like threads. That I mean, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
So, do you want to share any other high school memories before we go down south for a minute?
Yeah. I'm grateful that I grew up in San Mateo, in that it was a real safe place to, just be able to like run around a bit. Downtown San Mateo was really cool. I loved vintage shopping. Loved it. So I was friends with all the ladies at the like St. Vincent de Paul and all of the, resale shops. And
I'm going to go on record. I still like San Mateo.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the worst.
No, it's not. It really isn't. And like,
I don't know.
I was at a young age kind of into architecture. And so, there were some really cool pieces in downtown San Mateo. And interestingly, another bar I went to underage. Yes. Was the Bee, which was like one of the early gay bars in the Peninsula.
Okay.
It's gone now, but it was on B Street, and I remember going in there underage too.
Nice.
And then there were some cool pubs, and I liked the intersection of Japanese culture in San Mateo. I thought that I had exposure to Japanese food at a younger age because of it, which was really cool. And you've got like the old school Italian, and I just, it was a good place. I don't speak ill of it. Weather was great. I'm just so lucky. My parents, they have always created the most loving, cared for conditions for me and my sister to have grown up within. And we always have had a garden. So like my mom is an amazing cook. And she just always, she'd make bread for our sandwiches for school.
Right on.
And we always had to be home for dinner. Always had to be home for dinner. Like, even if I had a track meet or a cross country, as soon as it was done, I had to get home. So if I was going to go at someone's house and study or something, I had to have a really good reason. It was a tight, being the eldest, there were a lot of rules I had to follow, but then I got super sneaky at the end.
Right, you paved the way for
your sister. No, my sister thanks me. She's like, you kind of cut a wide swath. I was like,
you're welcome.
Yeah, here to take the heat. We lived on the hill, so I could actually sneak out and put my car in neutral and just like coast down the hill. It was amazing.
Brilliant.
It was so good. I'm lucky. Like, I never got busted.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Yeah. I got busted for other things, but did not get busted for the sneaking out. So, never.
You'll hear more about that on the special episode with Marcia.
After hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. After a couple drinks.
Do you remember your decision to leave to go to college? And, was it intentional to leave, or was it like, I just want to go to this school specifically?
Well, my dream was to go to NYU.
Okay.
I wanted to go to NYU.
For writing or English?
English or writing.
Okay.
Back then I was also thinking about communications. And so my parents were like, look, your sister is coming up right when you finish school, she's starting.
Right.
So we're not going to be able to afford the East Coast thing unless you can get a scholarship of some sort. But, they're like, otherwise you need to plan on UC. So then it was like, okay. And back then you could still kind of get into UC.
Right.
I was an advanced placement student. I loved school. I was a total bookworm, and, but I was a terrible test taker. Like SATs destroyed me. I ended up getting into UCLA. And a big thing actually that was important for me was that there was a study abroad program. I knew for sure I was going to want to live in Italy for a year.
Okay.
And that was part of the plan. And my parents were like, okay, you can do that, but you have to be out of school in 4 years. Because they know a lot of people, if you study abroad, they might like have another semester, and they're like, you can't let this drag on. And the other plan was, they're like, you won't have to work, but you need to get out in time. So those were the terms. I was like, but I did end up,
like they started the timer.
Pretty much. Totally. It's on tick, 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 tick.
Was your dad super stoked that you wanted to and then went to Italy?
Yeah. He was really happy. And where I was living in this off the beaten path neighborhood, it was so Venetian.
Yeah.
And talk about, I guess what I love the most about the Venetians is that they were so private. So as an investigative person,
Right.
I loved all the secrets of Venice. So there was like the speakeasy that they would throw these late night parties. You had to know someone, and it was like, it was such an awesome space. It was like this 2-level, all wood bar, and
Probably 17,000
pretty
years
much,
old.
yeah, exactly. It's like, it's from the, Napoleon drink here.
Right.
So, things like that, or like the little back alleys, and, there was this pizzeria that I remember I brought an Italian to. I'm like, this is the best pizza I've ever had. And he's like, what do you know about pizza? I'm like, just come have this pizza, tell me what you think. And then he was like, oh, Marcia, ma questa pizza buona. Like, he was like freaking out over this pizza. He's like, I didn't even know this existed here. Like, so that was the thing that I liked about Venice, is it would reveal itself if you plummeted the depths. And
Did your dad come visit?
my parents didn't, which is a bummer. I know that was a hard year in that, I didn't see my whole family for a year.
Right.
Some people went home at Christmas, but I was lucky to have relatives, so
That was your
helped.
trip to Calabria.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And so yeah, I think it was good to have that year.
Right.
I went there. I was 19, so yeah, I turned 20 living in Italy, and it changed a lot. Like as a woman, also to be under a different kind of male gaze, versus being American, and like just some of the awkwardness of how we flirt, and there, like it was a whole different dynamic, and suddenly you're like, wow, like
Catcalling, machismo.
more like they just look at you.
Right.
They look, and like they stare.
Right.
Italians stare.
Yes.
And the women stare too. Like they are very nosy people. They would check you out.
Right.
So I should just say, yeah, just the Italian gaze. But yeah, it was. I guess I really came into my womanliness and femininity living there, and also I loved living in a city where you walked. Mm-hmm. And especially coming from Los Angeles, where I was in a car all the time, to suddenly be walking everywhere, and then there were the rituals. Like I would have my guy that would make my cappuccino, and he would see me coming around the corner, and would just know to start.
Yeah.
And then I was smoking then, so at the tabaccaio, he'd see me, and then my Gagliardis would be sitting on the counter when I walked in, and he even lectured me too. Like after a while, he's like, Signorina, he's like, these cigarettes, he's like, they're troppo forti. He's like, these are very strong.
Yes, they are.
And then he's like, these are man cigarettes. And I was like, these are not man. And they were, I should clarify, they weren't like the typical Gagliardis. These were the Gagliardis blondes.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So he managed to convince me to go from the blues down to the reds. But it was a funny thing. Like, I was like, am I really having a conversation with my tabaccaio about what gendered cigarettes I should be smoking? But in a weird way, he was looking out for me of, just not having such high nicotine.
You had a little community of, right?
Yep.
Did you ever think about staying?
Oh, God.
I know that would have blown your dad's 4-year clock, but...
Oh, and of course, I fell madly in love. Madly. Oh, my
You're young, impressionable.
Yeah.
It's Italy. I'm like, you had to at least think about it.
Oh, yeah. No. I will say, in my life, the day I left Italy, and it's so stupid, but it was one of the days I cried the hardest in my life.
Right.
I mean, I've certainly cried more over loss of life in my life, but there was something that just really cracked my heart open. And part of it was I was madly in love with Michele Vasciaveo.
Again, where's he from?
No idea. But yeah, so it was like the whole story, it's like I'm studying literature, I'm madly in love, I'm living in one of the most beautiful places in the world. Like, why would I want to leave? But that was the deal with the parents. I had to get my ass home and I had to finish school.
That was Marcia Gagliardi. On the next episode of Storied San Francisco, Marcia tells us how she started Tablehopper and My Milligram. Part 2 drops this Thursday. Music for the podcast was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Original photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 4th season, we have more than 150 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you can, subscribe, rate, and review our show so we can reach even more folks. And if you'd like to drop us an old-fashioned email, we'd love that. The address is storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay strong, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.